Good morning, ladies, and this is Jaclyn. Today marks the initiation of my Fire Spirit series of 21 Questions podcast on Authentic Power Coaching Patreon. I appreciate your patronage, and just for a mere $20 a month, you have access to brain rewiring and memory enhancing audios, over 20 podcasts, and other healing materials. I'm so grateful for you tuning in. Now let's get that flame sparked. Today we'll be talking to Laura Rose about a book that she has been recommending called The Great Cosmic Mother. And who the hell is the Great Cosmic Mother anyway? And has she forsaken us? And how is this connected to her overall mission in helping her aid women return to the matriarchy? A mission that is deeply tied to her business called Returning to Her. So, Laura, what made you want to learn about the Great Cosmic Mother?
I was deep into my own healing from abuse and trauma, and Mother Nature is one of my key resources. She affects me on a profound level, and she is my greatest source of health and renewal.
Right. And how did reading it help to clarify some things for you?
Well, a big part of abuse is being lied to, and a big part of healing is finding the truth. And the book was a way of finding my truth as a woman, as my being a human on earth, and as how I'm supposed to heal from trauma.
And what's something that you wish everyone knew about this book?
It's based on science, biology, archaeology, history, and spirituality as well. The book is not somebody's opinion. It is not scripture. It is years and years of research put into a great text of the truth about life and God.
So how is this book connected to your vision around reestablishing a matriarchy?
My vision is to help all women heal from abuse and reclaim their inner power. And that's what I do on my website, healingfromharm.com, and various social media sites. If you Google or search for Returning to Her on Tumblr, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc., you'll find me. And the idea is, by returning to matriarchal healing, and I have a video on this on YouTube, matriarchal healing versus patriarchal healing, returns us to a sense of wholeness within us because we find our own inner truth. And when you find that, you become very rooted and very solid in yourself and your identity.
I love that. So how does the author of the book that inspired you, Monica Shaw, explain how women are responsible for the existence of men?
She talks about, well, the very first few pages of the book are describing how everything, all life on earth existed as female, and everything reproduced through an act called parthenogenesis, which is an egg, a female egg mating with its polar body. And through parthenogenesis, the reproduction, it's more like a cloning process as the next generation gets birthed. And so what happened with the course of evolution is the XY chromosome, males, came in to help diversify life forms so that it wasn't just simply cloning. There was now a lot more diversity in the creation of whether it is plants, animals, humans, whatever it is.
Wow. And what kind of damage have men brought onto the great cosmic mother?
Well, this could be a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
um, in essence, the greatest damage is they created a world built on lies. The patriarchy replaced the great mother and Mother Nature as the source of life and worship onto a false male god who became the creator of life. And from that lie builds every other lie that you can think of, builds a society that is against the natural order of things. And when you go against the natural order of things and the natural cycles of life, the only thing that comes from that is destruction.
Yeah.
So men and patriarchy have brought destruction at a great, great level.
Now, in this destructiveness, what do you think the prerogative of men is?
It's a really good question. My view of prerogative of men, I'm not quite sure what the view of Monica Shu is. I think she has a prerogative of the patriarchy, but she doesn't really go into the generalizations of men. My view of it kind of goes back to, I guess, if you're going to go to the basic biology of what happens to a male in gestation, in early gestation, all embryos start as female, and it isn't until later into the development stage where the possibility of men can come into play as a different sex. And when that happens, they have to work really, really hard to survive the environment of the womb, which is more conducive to females surviving. So they sort of, I guess, fight against the natural order of females being the surviving species. So maybe the prerogative of men, if you go to this basic biology, is to keep fighting and conquering to protect their own existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Um, it
Makes
sure seems to
sense.
play out that way in the patriarchy, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And what's women's early culture like if we were to go back to the beginning when um you know women were creating by themselves and they had their own culture and they didn't really need a man to procreate. What was that woman's early culture like and like
I
how
like to think of women's culture being kind of like a labyrinth, kind of like a circle. Whereas when you think of men's culture, it's like the ladder of success, right? All about hierarchy and power over. Whereas the women's culture is more power with. So at the center is our creator, the great cosmic mother and Mother Nature, because we literally do not exist without her. She feeds us, she heals us, she cleans us, she shelters us. So honoring her is at the center. And then the next rung would be, honoring what keeps us surviving in our community. And that is making sure that we have our needs met and our nourishment. And who does that? Well, the mothers do, the women do. They're the ones that are tied to the next generation with the babies. They're the ones that work with the plants and work with the kitchen utensils, and they were the ones that designed pottery, and they're the ones that help the community thriving. So they become sort of the next rung, and then the rung after that is all the other women who help, and then the men help as assisting to keep that community strong. and to provide extra sustenance, like, the hunting of meat. Although women did that as well, a lot of men did that because they were more expendable. I mean, if a woman gets lost in the community, a lot of survival mechanisms get lost too. For example, caring of the young. Whereas if a man gets lost in community and hunt, you just come home with less meat. So,
Yeah.
um, so I like to think of resurrecting women's culture would be
Yeah, that's the question. How can we
going
resurrect
back,
culture?
going back to the circle, going back to the rings, going back to the center and the root, as opposed to a hierarchical ladder of what we think success is.
And how are women cultural creators
By
innately?
by literally being able to create life itself, even if you don't want to, or even if you're incapable. That energy, that life force runs through every single cell of your body. And if you can tap into that on both a physical and mental level, you now have the ability to turn that creative nature of yourself into whatever else you want to do in your community, in your world.
What symbols does this book mention as part of what we can consider divinely feminine?
The moon is a big one, because the moon affects the lunar tidal rhythms of the sea, and of course us, as we are 2/3 water. So the moon plays a huge part. And because the moon also is has a great connection to the menstrual cycle of the female as well. So there is a lot of talk about the moon and menstruation and womanhood. They also talk about, there's some great symbols of like statues from the Paleolithic, Neolithic area of a woman giving birth, a woman nursing the young, the maiden mother crone, which talks about the cycles of life, from spring to planting the seeds, to fall to harvest, to winter, looking back and learning for the next season. The maiden mother crone, the maiden, the young woman growing, mother, the harvest, the giving birth, and then the crone teaching the next generation of women of what the lessons that they've learned.
Great. And how might astrology tie into this whole idea of symbols and the feminine consciousness?
Well, astrology is the study of the cosmos. And if we think of the cosmos as the great cosmic mother, you're literally studying female consciousness and how it creates life itself. Astrology, I think, goes a little bit deeper into the more specific things like your star signs and how it affects your moods and your character traits. Whereas if you were to pull it back into more of the greater scheme of things, the study of the cosmos allows us to study how it affects Mother Nature, which then in turn affects us.
Yeah, amazing. So I know you spoke a little bit about some of the images in the book when we talk about symbols. How do you feel about those images that were in that book? I mean, they were like I didn't read the book, but I'm going to. But I did look at like a couple of the first pages, and there was this image of a goddess with like a head popping out of her vagina, and I was like, wow, and kind of highlighting the grotesque aspect of creation. Um, how did you feel when you saw some of the images in the book?
In one simple sentence, that the truth was finally being shown.
Yeah, it's authentic. For sure. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Um, so what is female cosmology? What does that mean?
I had a bit of a dilemma answering this question because my mind automatically went to feminine versus masculine cosmology, and then the whole patriarchal thinking would make the masculine the norm and then the feminine just sort of like a side mission, where it really isn't like that at all. When you read the book and you study the great cosmic mother, there is no female cosmology. Cosmology is female. So it's about rewriting it so that the truth and the value of it becomes more clear. That makes sense. Can you still hear me?
Oh, yep. Sorry.
Okay.
I was talking. I was like, oh no, I'm muted. Yeah, we
Okay.
had spoken to about something aside from the podcast yesterday. We were talking about hierarchies
Mm-hmm.
and how that's kind of a male concept. And you
Mm-hmm.
said something really brilliant. You said that, with the feminine consciousness, all the answers are in the body, all the answers are within. There is no
Mm.
hierarchy. Can you explore that a bit more and talk to that idea a little bit?
Yes, that's actually a big part of my work is returning us to the body. When you are abused or whether you're traumatized, whether it's medically, physically, or through relationships, dissociation is a massive, massive part of it. And I suffered, well, I still do to some degree, but I'm healing severe structural dissociation, which is basically living in your mind. You are completely removed from your body. And the reason why you do that is because there's so much pain and suffering that's being held there. And in order to heal, you have to turn around, face it, but you got to do it safely so that you don't re traumatize yourself. And when you can finally get into your body, and then your body as a connection to nature, the dissociation leaves and you start to feel more whole and you start to feel more clear minded and more content and peaceful. Like the rumination goes away, the anxiety goes away, the depression goes away. And you start to feel more present and more strong like a 100-year-old oak tree kind of strong in your body. And matriarchal healing is all about returning us to the body. And there is no hierarchy in the body. There's no hierarchy in Mother Nature. It just is. Everything works in relation to everything else. So whether it's the forest and the water and the animals, to the air, to fire, to whether it's the bones and the blood and the hormones, to the neurons in the body, everything works in cohesion with each other. And so a return to healing, a return to the root of us is stepping away from the idea of power and just stepping into the notion of what is. Does that make sense? Like,
It
is
makes
that,
sense to me. Yeah. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it makes complete sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. Another concept that was brought up in the book as I kind of fingered through the whole glossary section and the contents, I was looking at, what these terms are, and one of the things that they mentioned was the first speech. What does that
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yes. Yeah, they talk about the first speech in the book, and I think it's quite fascinating. Um, she talks about Well, when you think about it, in a very, very, very early society where the community is just starting to get into agriculture and but still foraging for plants and seeds, and but also at the same time still hunting their meat as well, there has to be some sort of communication between the tribal members of how how are you going to pick this plant, how are you going to replant it, how are you going to grow it, how are you going to communicate with your neighbors. And men, if they're going to go out to hunt, is usually done silently and with body gestures because you don't want to scare the prey. Whereas if you're in a safer place and you're at one tree foraging or planting and somebody is, 10 meters away doing the same thing, how are you going to communicate with each other while you're also holding your child and the basket of food that you've just picked? Well, verbally would be the way to do it. So the author talks about how the first speech was probably done verbally with woman to woman, and also with woman to child, because when you're in the womb, you can't use your body language to communicate with your parents. You can't really feel them or see them, but you can hear them. You can hear the mother's voice. And that's how the mother could also talk to the child as well. So from that, the development of verbal communication probably was formed through womanhood.
Beautiful. When we think about the serpent, I know you had mentioned before to me outside of this that there are different interpretations of what the serpent means. Um, but to Monica Shaw, what does the cosmic serpent represent?
The cosmic serpent represents sort of an eternal life. So the serpent, the snake, sheds its skin over and over and over again as it grows throughout its life. So the symbolic meaning is, so can we shed our skins. We can shed our past selves to become newer selves. A big, big concept in matriarchal discussions in matriarchal livelihood is the concept of birth, death, rebirth. And it could mean in the grand sense of you're birthed into life and then you die from this life and then you're rebirthed into whatever your culture believes is the next life. Or it could mean it more in just an everyday sense of, you shed an old pattern that doesn't work for you anymore to develop a new pattern that works better for you. You shed old ideas for new knowledge. You shed every day, your body excretes urine and feces as you go and eat and drink again to refuel yourself. So the cosmic serpent is a spiritual symbol of this very organic process of life, growth, harvest, hibernation, decay, death, and then rebirth again.
Right.
The serpent sheds its skin, so can we.
Right. And how can we use this symbol of the cosmic serpent as women today? How can this symbol be useful for us to know, to come to know?
Yeah, great question. Well, in opposition to the cosmic serpent, you'll find it's kind of funny how you see in patriarchal medicine, which is conventional Western medicine, you'll see the picture of the serpent as one of the symbols. on their healing icons, and their view of the serpent is different. To them, it's more about power structure, and the way Western medicine views health is just to perpetuate life at all costs and deny death. So there is no birth, death, rebirth. It's how can we deny all symptoms of any darkness and pain? How can we numb it, keep going, and then push away the idea of death until it finally takes us one day, and then not know how to grieve it. So one way women can return to a matriarchal healing, to a more whole healing, is to honor the idea that we naturally shed ourselves, that we naturally lose part of ourselves to create new part of ourselves, that we naturally feel pain, suffering, and loss, and to embrace it and work with it is what gives you the tools to create a newer self, to be able to move forward. All the ideas of honoring the shedding as opposed to just tossing it aside helps you to honor yourself as a human, living, breathing being.
So has the cosmic mother forsaken us? That is the title of this podcast. That is the question that I wanted to really drive home with you. So, you know, we talk about the serpent, we talk about feminine consciousness and how everything is feminine, that we really can't divorce ourselves from the feminine. And yet we're stuck in this illusion. We're stuck in this ideology and this mental scape of patriarchy. How does the cosmic mother assist us in this space of the patriarchy to return to her? Has she forsaken us?
No, we have forsaken her. We keep forsaking her by refusing to pause and tune into ourselves and the messages that our body is giving us. When you stop running from yourself and stop running from the truths that keep showing up in your world, and you turn around and you face it, all the answers are there. Your body is constantly talking to you. Your body is your soul. That is probably the biggest message, which goes into the next question, that we need to start teaching everybody again.
Let me ask the next question. I know I've got them written out for you, but the people listening don't know them. So, yes. So what are two things that you believe that this book can help cultivate in the women who read it, and even just in children, right? Children who, you know, maybe they're brought up in a patriarchal society, and they're brought up believing in Santa Claus and Jesus and all these male figures as godheads, and they're completely disconnected to their bodies. They're completely disconnected from nature and the feminine and who they are, what they're greatly a part of. So how would you recommend, well, not just how, but what are some ideas from this book that you would recommend us teaching to children and to women that really resonated with you the most?
We have to reverse the process. So the patriarchal process is the mind dictates the body, which then dictates world matter. And it's actually the reverse. World matter, nature dictates our body, our sensory, our motor responses, which then dictates our mind. So when we go back to the proper order of things, then we start to become, well, we lose the dissociation. We lose the dissociation and the delusion of the world. And instead of getting lost in these narratives and intellectual concepts, we go back to our senses, to our emotions, to our eyes and ears, to the movement, to the elements of the earth, to how things are guiding us and how we're supposed to live and thrive. So we have to reverse the order of everything.
Why don't you take some time as we wrap up to tell the listeners how you'll provide some space for women to return to the feminine in your return to her matriarchal business coaching. What do you plan to do? How do you do it? Tell us a little bit about how you offer your service to women.
And if you visit my website, healingfromharm.com, you will see my blogs where I write about my journey from delusion and dissociation from the real raw truth of divinity and just wholeness and peaceful living and being healthy. I write about my journey on my site, so you can find all the answers there. The way I do it is I approach it by, let's return to our bodies. Let's return to the messages that it's telling us, and let's return to the intuitive sense that we naturally have, especially as women, on how we are meant to live. And when you tune into that, all the other side effects of living from, of being harmed by patriarchy start to fall away. They start to heal themselves. The body is meant to heal itself, and it's meant to do so with Mother Nature. We have to start to work with it as opposed to against it.
Thank you so much, Laura Rose, for speaking your truth on this channel. Please check out Laura Rose's business for matriarchal centered coaching and called Returning to Her. I'll link it below. And I appreciate your time. And I'd recommend any woman who feels like they resonate with Laura Rose to reach out to her. I'll post and, reach out to her if you feel so called. If you feel like your knowledge can add to the collective, please don't hesitate to reach out. Please tune in next week on Tuesday at 8 a.m. to hear our next guest and explore her expertise to ignite you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will close with that.